What are the top 10 conspiracy theories of the 19th century? Stay tuned to find out. Well, everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the top 10s in history. This will also be available on a podcast as well, so if you want to listen to it instead of watching it, by all means check out my podcasts on the Uncharted Past. Available on Amazon Music and Spotify at present. It will be coming to iTunes as well. But yes, folks, I've had a lot of comments about the first video related to this topic, which was the top 10 conspiracy theories in ancient history. If you haven't watched it so far, definitely check it out. A lot of you liked it. So I was getting a lot of comments, people saying, can you do another conspiracy theory one? So this is what this video will detail. It's the top 10 conspiracy theories of the 19th century. But before we get into the top 10, folks, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and share and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much to everybody who's done so far. But yes, folks, without any further ado, let's get into the top 10 conspiracy theories of the 19th century. In 10th place, we'll have Shakespeare's authorship conspiracy. What is the event and incident? Well, William Shakespeare, a 16th century English playwright from Stratford upon Avon, is credited with writing iconic plays and sonnets published in the first folio, 1623. In the mid-19th century, doubts about his authorship emerged in Britain, particularly with the publication of Delia Bacon's The Philosophy of the Plays of Shakespeare's Unfolded, 1857, and William H. Smith's Was Lord Bacon the Author of Shakespeare's Plays in 1856. What was the conspiracy theory? Well, the theory posits that Shakespeare did not write the works attributed to him, proposing alternative authors such as Sir Francis Bacon, Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, or Christopher Marlowe. Proponents argued that a commoner with limited formal education could not produce such sophisticated literature, suggesting an elite figure or group hid their identity behind Shakespeare's name. What was the origins of this? Well, the theory arose from Victorian class biases, questioning how a man of a modest background could possess the knowledge reflected in the plays. Skeptics pointed to the lack of detailed biographical records about Shakespeare and alleged cryptographic codes in the text as evidence of hidden authorship. The rise of literary criticism and historical skepticism in the 19th century fueled the debate, with figures like Delia Bacon claiming Bacon's philosophical writings matched the play's themes. Was there any evidence? Well, no definitive evidence supports the theory. Contemporary records, including tributes from Brian Johnson and others, confirm Shakespeare's authorship. The first folio explicitly credits him, and stylistic analysis shows consistency across his works. The theory relies on speculation, exploiting the sparse documentation typical of 16th century figures. Modern scholars overwhelmingly reject alternative authorship, citing historical and textual evidence. Claims of cryptographic codes have been debunked as subjective interpretations. What's the legacy of this conspiracy theory? Well, the conspiracy theory persists in literary circles, endorsed by figures like Mark Twain and Sigmund Freud, and remains a niche topic with groups like the Oxfordian movement. It reflects 19th century class prejudice and spurred academic debates on authorship, textual analysis, and the nature of genius. The theory has inspired books, films, and ongoing discussions, shaping how Shakespeare's legacy is studied globally, particularly in English-speaking countries, and highlighting the intersection of history and literature. So in 10th place, we'll have Shakespeare's authorship conspiracy. In 9th place, we'll have the Indian Rebellion of 1857 conspiracy. What was the event? Well, the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, was a widespread uprising against British East India Company rule, beginning with sepoys, Indian soldiers, in Meerut and spreading across northern India. Sparked by rumours that new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat, offending Hindu and Muslim beliefs. It involved diverse groups, including peasants and princes, and was suppressed by 1858. What is the conspiracy theory associated with this? Well, two main theories emerged. The British claimed the rebellion was a coordinated plot by Indian princes and Mughal loyalists to restore pre-colonial rule, while Indian rebels and nationalists believed the British deliberately provoked the uprising via the cartridge issue to justify harsher colonial control and further land seizures. What was the origins? Well, the cartridge rumour, whether true or not, tapped into deep-seated resentment against British cultural insensitivity, land annexations via the doctrine of lapse, and economic exploitation. British authorities, fearing a repeat of revolutionary movements like the French Revolution, exaggerated the rebellion's organisation to rally support for suppression. Indian nationalists, post-rebellion, saw the British response as evidence of a calculated plan to entrench their power, amplified by later writings like Vinayak Damodar's Savarkar's The Indian War of Independence in 1909. What was the evidence, or lack thereof? Well, no evidence supports a coordinated princely plot. The rebellion was largely spontaneous, driven by localised grievances, though figures like Nana Sahib and Bahadur Shah II lent symbolic leadership. The cartridge issue was a genuine administrative blunder, not a deliberate provocation, as British records show attempts to rectify the mistake. Colonial policies were oppressive, but not part of a premeditated conspiracy to spark a rebellion. Both sides' claims were fueled by mutual distrust rather than concrete evidence. What's the legacy of this conspiracy theory? Well, the rebellion ended East India Company rule, transferring India to British Crown control, and reshaped colonial policies, increasing cultural sensitivity, but also repression. It galvanised Indian nationalism, inspiring movements like the Indian National Congress, 1885, and later independence struggles. Globally, it became a case study in anti-colonial resistance, influencing other movements in Asia and Africa. The conspiracy theory persists in historical debates about British intent and Indian agency, shaping South Asian identity and post-colonial scholarship. So in ninth place, we'll have the Indian Rebellion of 1857. In 8th place, and I actually thought this would have been her, we had the Great Irish Famine conspiracy theory. What was the event? Well, the Great Irish Famine between 1845 to 1852, triggered by a potato blight, devastated Ireland, killing approximately 1 million people and forcing millions to emigrate to other countries. Despite Ireland's agricultural productivity, food exports to Britain continued, and British relief efforts such as workhouses and soup kitchens were widely criticised as inadequate, exacerbating the crisis. What's this conspiracy theory? Well, the theory alleges that the British government deliberately exacerbated the famine as a form of genocide or population control to weaken Ireland's Catholic majority, clear land for the Protestant landlords, and consolidate colonial power rather than it being solely a natural disaster related to the Plato Blight. What is the origins of this? Well, Irish nationalists, notably John Mitchell in The Last Conquest of Ireland, perhaps 1861, pointed to continued food exports, mass evictions under the Poor Law Extension Act, 1847, and minimal relief as evidence of a starvation policy. The theory gained traction amid Anglo-Irish tensions, colonial grievances, and the Irish diaspora's growing political voice in America and indeed in Britain. Political outrage was fueled by reports of overflowing granaries and landlord profiteering during mass starvation. What's the evidence, or was there any evidence? No direct evidence proves intentional genocide. The potato blight was a natural disaster, and British policies were driven by laissez-faire economics, prioritising market stability over humanitarian aid, not extermination. Food exports met trade obligations, and relief efforts, though insufficient, for example, 3% of GDP was spent on aid, included temporary measures like soup kitchens. However, policies like mass evictions, over 600,000 people displaced, and high taxes did worsen the suffering, lending credence to perceptions of negligence and malice from the British. Historians debate, though, whether this constitutes systematic intent or gross mismanagement. What's the legacy? Well, I think it speaks for itself. The legacy galvanised Irish nationalism, fueling groups like the Young Irelanders and the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and contributed to the later Home Rule movement and eventual Irish independence in 1922. It deepened Anglo-Irish tensions and shaped Irish identity, with the famine memorialised in global diaspora communities. The conspiracy remains debated in historical scholarship, though, influencing discussions of colonial oppression and famine policy in contexts like India and indeed Africa. It underscores the enduring impact of perceived betrayal on national memory. So in 8th place, we'll have the Great Irish Famine Conspiracy. In 7th place, folks, we'll have the Flat Earth Revival. What was it? Well, in 1849, English writer Samuel Rothbottom, under pseudonym Parallax, published Zetetic Astronomy in Britain, reviving the notion that the Earth is a flat disk. His Bedford level experiment, claiming to show no curvature, challenged the scientific consensus of a spherical Earth, gaining a small following in Europe and North America. What's the conspiracy theory? Well, the theory claims the Earth is flat, and evidence for a spherical Earth is fabricated by a scientific elite to suppress alternative truths, potentially signaling a radical reordering of knowledge with apocalyptic implications for established institutions. What was the origins of this theory? Well, the theory stemmed from distrust in emerging scientific institutions during the Industrial Revolution, particularly in Britain, where rapid technological change sparked skepticism about authority. Rothbottom's ideas appealed to secular skeptics and some religious fundamentalists who saw the spherical Earth as a symbol of elite control. The theory gained traction amid broader 19th century debates over science's role in society, from Darwinism to astronomy. Was there any evidence? Well, the flat Earth theory contradicts millennial of evidence, from ancient Greek calculations of Earth's circumference to 19th century navigational data and global expeditions. Rothbottom's experiments ignored atmospheric refraction and scale, and were debunked by scientists like Alfred Russel Wallace. The scientific community dismissed the theory, but its persistence in fringe circles reflect a broader anti-establishment sentiment. What's the legacy? Well, it does still persist, to be honest. The flat earth revival laid the groundwork for modern anti-science conspiracies, emphasizing distrust and expertise. It influenced 20th century flat earth societies in Britain and the United States, and resurfaced in the internet age via platforms like YouTube. Globally, it reflects 19th century tensions between science and public belief, with parallels in contemporary debates over climate change or indeed vaccines. The theory's apocalyptic framing foreshadowed fears of paradigm shifting scientific revelations. So in seventh, we'll have the flat earth revival. In sixth place, we'll have the Catholic takeover of America. What was it? Well, in the 1830s to the 1850s, a surge in Catholic immigration from Ireland and Germany to the United States, driven by famine and economic hardship, transformed the demographic landscape of a predominantly Protestant nation. This sparked nativist fears, culminating in events like the 1844 Philadelphia Bible riots, where Protestant Catholic clashes killed dozens of people. What is the conspiracy theory? Well, the theory alleges that Catholic immigrants were part of a Vatican orchestrated plot to undermine Protestant America by controlling politics, education, and public institutions, ultimately subverting democracy to establish Catholic dominance. What was the origins of these? Well, nativist propaganda, such as Samuel Morse's foreign conspiracy against the liberties of the United States in 1835, amplified fears of Catholic voting blocs and parochial schools. The theory reflected anxieties about immigration, cultural change, and the integration of Irish Catholics who faced discrimination. It drew on older European anti-Catholic tropes, but was intensified by America's rapid urbanization and political shifts. Was there any evidence? Well, no evidence supports a Vatican-led conspiracy. Catholic immigrants were largely poor, focused on survival, and lacked the organisation for such a plot. Political influence, like Irish Democratic Party affiliations, was organic, not orchestrated. Investigations into Catholic institutions found no subversive activity, and the Vatican's focus was on European politics, not American conquest. The theory was driven by prejudice rather than facts. What's the legacy of this? Well, the theory fueled the rise of the Know Nothing Party, which won significant elections in the 1850s and shaped American nativism, influencing anti-immigrant policies. It contributed to religious discrimination, with echoes in later anti-Catholic movements like the Ku Klux Klan. Globally, it parallels other 19th century fears of foreign influence, from Chinese immigrants to Australia to Muslims in India, for example. The theory's legacy persists in modern immigration debates, highlighting tensions over cultural integration. So in sixth place, folks, we'll have the Catholic takeover of America. Now we're into the top five. In fifth place, we'll have the Taiping Rebellion conspiracy. What was the event? Well, the Taiping Rebellion between 1850 to 1864 in China, led by Hong Huiguang, who claimed to be Jesus' brother, was a massive uprising against the Qing dynasty, killing between 20 to 30 million people. Centered in southern China, it combined quasi-Christian ideology with social reform, challenging imperial rule. What is the conspiracy theory? Well, the theory posited that foreign powers, particularly Britain and France, secretly backed the Taipings to destabilize China and expand trade influence post-Opium Wars, or that king elites fabricated the rebellion scale to justify mass repression and deflect from internal failures. What was the origins of these? Well, Western presence in China, following the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, fueled suspicions of foreign meddling, especially given missionary contacts with Hong. King propaganda exaggerated the Taiping threat to rally loyalists, while Chinese intellectuals speculated about external plots to explain the rebellion's rapid spread. The theory reflected broader anxieties about China's sovereignty amid growing European imperialism. Was there any evidence? Well, no evidence supports foreign backing. The Taipings were a domestic movement driven by Hong's ideology and social discontent. Western powers, whilst opportunistic, for example seizing trade concessions, remained neutral or supported the king to protect interests. King records confirm the rebellion's massive scale, though propaganda amplified its apocalyptic framing. Claims of fabrication were speculative, rooted in distrust rather than evidence. What's the legacy of this? Well, the rebellion weakened the Qing dynasty, hastening foreign influence and contributing to its 1911 collapse. The conspiracy theory shaped Chinese distrust of modern Western intervention, influencing nationalist movements like the Boxer Rebellion 1899 to 1901. Globally, it became a case study in how internal crises are blamed on external plots, with parallels in modern Chinese foreign policy skepticism. The theory's legacy underscores the intersection of imperialism and conspiracy narratives in 19th century Asia. So in fifth place, we'll have the Taiping Rebellion conspiracy. In fourth, we'll have the Illuminati and the French Revolution conspiracy. What was the event? Well, the French Revolution between 1789 and 1799 overthrew the French monarchy, reshaped European politics, and sparked widespread upheaval. In the early 19th century, conservative thinkers across Europe revived claims that secret societies drove the revolution, focusing on the Bavarian Illuminati, a short-lived Enlightenment group founded in 1776. What is the conspiracy theory? Well, the theory alleges that the Illuminati, despite its 1785 dissolution, secretly orchestrated the French Revolution to dismantle monarchy and religion, manipulating events to establish secular, revolutionary control across Europe. What was the origins of these? Well, the theory was popularized by John Robinson's Proofs of a Conspiracy in 1797 in Britain, and Augustin Birrell's memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism in 1797, published in France, reflecting conservative fears of radical change. The 19th century rise of nationalism and secularism revived these claims, as monarchists and clergy blamed secret societies for ongoing revolutions, such as in 1830 and 1848. The Illuminati's secretive nature made it a convenient scapegoat for unexplained political shifts. Was there any evidence? Well, the Bavarian Illuminati was disbanded in 1785 by the Bavarian government with no evidence of continued activity. The French Revolution was driven by economic crises, for example, debt from the American Revolution, Enlightenment ideas, and social inequalities, not a secret society. The theory relies on speculation, forged documents, and exaggerated connections between Illuminati ideals and revolutionary rhetoric. Historians dismiss it as a product of reactionary panic. What's the legacy of this? Well, the Illuminati became a global cultural bogeyman, influencing 20th century conspiracies about elite control, for example, the New World Order. The theory fueled distrust in secular governance, shaping conservative movements in Europe and America. Its persistence in modern Illuminati myths, from pop culture to online forums, reflects its enduring appeal as an explanation for complex political upheavals. The conspiracy highlights 19th century fears of hidden power structures in a rapidly changing world. So, in fourth place, folks, we'll have Illuminati and the French Revolution conspiracy theory. Now we're into the top three. In third place, and I struggle to pronounce this word, so apologies, it's the phrenology fraud conspiracy. What was the event? Well, phrenology, a pseudoscience developed by Franz Joseph Gall in the late 18th century, gained popularity in Europe, the United States, and colonial regions like Australia and India in the 1820s to 1840s. It claimed that skull shapes revealed personality traits influencing medicine, criminology, and social policy. What is the conspiracy theory? Well, phrenologists and governments were accused of using phrenology as a fraudulent tool to justify social control, racial hierarchies, or suppress dissent, particularly in colonial contexts, where it was used to categorize indigenous populations as inferior to the majority. The people in power. What was the origins? The theory arose from public skepticism as phrenology's claims were debunked by scientists like Francois Magadin in France. Its use in prisons, asylums, and colonial administrations, for example, to justify British policies in India, sparked fears of manipulation. Critics, including early sociologists and reformers, saw phrenology as a pretext for elite control, amplified by its application to criminal profiling and racial pseudoscience. Was there any evidence? Well, phrenology was discredited by the 1850s as experiments showed no correlation between skull shape and behaviour. Its use in policy reflected era biases, for example, racial stereotypes at that time, rather than a coordinated conspiracy. No evidence suggests phrenologists or governments deliberately fabricated the science for control. They genuinely believed its claims, though with very harmful and often devastating consequences. The theory was driven by a legitimate concern about misuse, but exaggerated intent. What's the legacy? Well, the conspiracy sparked global skepticism of pseudoscience in medicine and governance, influencing the rise of evidence-based science. It shaped ethical debates on science applications, particularly in colonial contexts, where phrenology's racial claims justified oppression. The theory's legacy persists in critiques of vast sciences, from eugenics to modern AI profiling, and underscores the dangers of untested theories in policy or the like. Globally, it remains a cautionary tale in scientific history. So in third, we'll have the phrenology fraud conspiracy. In second place, just missing out on the top spot, we'll have the anarchist apocalypse conspiracy. What was the event? Well, the rise of anarchism in the 1880s to 1890s, marked by high-profile assassinations. For example, Tsar Alexander in Russia in 1881, the French president Zédé Carnot in 1894, and bombings across Europe fueled fears of societal collapse. Anarchist groups advocated for stateless societies, often through propaganda of the dead. What was the conspiracy theory? Well, anarchists were part of a global plot to trigger an apocalyptic overthrow of governments, orchestrated by secret societies or foreign powers, for example, Russia or Germany, seeking to destabilize rivals with the goal of ending civilized order. What was the origins of these? Well, political violence in France, Italy, Spain, and Russia, combined with Anarchist literature like Mikhail Buchanan's writings alarmed elites who feared a coordinated revolutionary wave akin to the French Revolution. Sensationalist media and governments exaggerated anarchist networks to justify repression, while European rivalries led to accusations of foreign sponsorship, for example, Germany funding French anarchists. The theory reflected broader anxieties about industrialization, class conflict, and political change. Was there any evidence to support it though? Well, anarchist actions were decentralized, driven by individual or small group ideologies, not a global conspiracy. No evidence supports claims of secret society or foreign power coordination. Most anarchist attacks were spontaneous or loosely linked. Government investigations, like those post 1898 Rome Conference, found no centralized plot. Repression was often politically motivated, exaggerating the threat of control. What was the legacy of this? Well, the conspiracy led to global anti-anarchist measures, including the 1898 International Anti-Anarchist Conference and national laws like Britain's Aliens Act in 1905. It shaped modern perceptions of terrorism as an apocalyptic threat, influencing counter-terrorism policies worldwide. The theory's legacy persists in fears of ideological extremism, from communism to modern jihadism, and highlights how governments exploit perceived threats to expand their authority. Globally, it remains a pivotal case in the history of political fearmongering. So, in second, we'll have the anarchist apocalypse conspiracy in the 19th century. And in first place, can anybody guess what it is? The number one conspiracy theory, and I must stress again, folks, according to AI, this is, we'll have the Poitiers scheme. What was it? Well, in the 1820s, Scottish adventurer Gregor MacGregor promoted Poitiers, a fictional Central American country, to European investors, primarily in Britain and France. He sold land titles, bonds, and immigration packages, claiming Poitiers was a prosperous colony ripe for development, leveraging interest in Latin America independence post 1820s. What was the conspiracy theory? Well, MacGregor's scheme was seen as part of a broader plot by European speculators to defraud investors and destabilize Latin American independence movements, potentially triggering an economic apocalypse for emerging nations by draining all their economic resources. Some believed it aimed to suppress regional development to maintain colonial influence worldwide. What was the origins of these? Well, the theory emerged from the post-Napoleonic economic speculation boom as Latin America independence, for example Mexico in 1821, created investment fever. MacGregor's elaborate hoax, complete with fake maps, currency, and a Poitiers government, fueled suspicions of a wider deceit involving European bankers or colonial powers. The scheme's catastrophic failure, with settlers dying in Honduras, amplified claims of a deliberate plot to exploit and destabilize these nations. Was there any evidence? Well, MacGregor acted alone, driven by personal profit, with no evidence of a larger speculator or indeed a colonial plot. Investors lost 200,000 due to gullibility and lack of due diligence, not a coordinated conspiracy. Latin American nations were unaffected by the scheme, and no records link it to broader destabilization efforts. The theory was fueled by the era's distrust of speculative finance and colonial ambitions. What's the legacy of this? Well, the Poitiers scheme exposed the risks of unregulated speculative finance, influencing early security laws in Britain and Europe, such as the 1844 Joint Stock Companies Act. It became a global case study in financial fraud, shaping cautionary narratives about investment scams. The theory's apocalyptic framing highlighted fears of economic collapse in newly independent nations, resonating in modern Ponzi scheme discussions. Globally, it underscores the intersection of colonialism, finance, and conspiracy in the 19th century, with parallels in contemporary emerging markets. So, in first place, we'll have the Ponzi scheme. So, there you go, folks. What do you think of that top 10? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? I personally disagree with a lot of them. Some of them probably should have been higher. There was some that I'm not going to mention, probably weren't included in there. That could be for another video. But yeah, what's everybody's opinions, folks? Do you agree with the list? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all soon.